Hi everyone, today's lesson is going to focus on the process of photosynthesis. And as you can guess from this picture here, this is a process that involves plants and sunlight. Our essential questions for today's lesson include how does the sun supply living things with the energy that they need? So our objective for today's lesson is to answer that question. You should be able to explain how the sun supplies living things with energy they need, and also describe what happens during the process of photosynthesis. Our key terms for today's lesson include autotroph, heterotroph, photosynthesis, chlorophyll, products, and reactants. Okay, so let's start with our first two terms, autotroph and heterotroph. All living things can be divided into these two categories. Autotrophs are organisms that can make their own food, and heterotrophs are organisms that cannot make their own food. Now, when we're talking about making our own food, we're not talking about going into the kitchen and whipping up a meal. We're talking about being able to make food within our cells in our bodies. Okay, and remember that when we learned about the parts of a cell, we learned that certain parts of the cells are responsible for certain functions or jobs. So autotrophs have a special part in their cell, we'll talk about it in a little bit, that allows them to make their own food within their bodies through this process called photosynthesis. Heterotrophs are organisms that cannot make their own food. Their cells don't have this special organelle that allows them to make their own food within their bodies. All right, so let's take a look at this picture here that shows a savanna, probably somewhere in Africa. And we've got some zebras, we've got some lions, we've got some plants. Looks like a typical ecosystem. And I want you to think about which organisms in this picture are autotrophs. Which organisms in this picture would be able to make their own food in their own cells? Which organisms in this picture are heterotrophs? Now, heterotrophs, since they can't make their own food, have to eat other organisms. So anything that eats something else is a heterotroph. Okay, so if we take a look at this picture, the organisms in this picture that are autotrophs would be all of the plants. Okay, plants actually can't go out and make their own food. Can't go out and eat other organisms. So they have to actually be able to make their own food within their cells. They have special organelles that allow them to do that. Anything that eats other organisms, like the zebras or the lions, those would be considered heterotrophs because they can't make their own food in their bodies. They have to eat other organisms for energy. Okay, so basically plants are autotrophs. They're able to make their own food.